My name is Ivy Carson. I'm 40 and I live in a quiet corner of San Diego with ocean air and hydrangeas that bloom late into fall. I work as a communications director for a mid-sized healthcare nonprofit, the kind of job that comes with color-coded spreadsheets, donor luncheons, and a lot of practice smiles. I've been married to Ethan for 10 years. We met at a networking mixer back when I still wore heels to impress and used words like synergy without irony. He worked in finance and had this disarming confidence that made everyone in the room want to talk to him. I liked that he made me laugh. I liked that he listened when I talked about stories and people instead of just data and outcomes. The last few months had been hard to read. Ethan had been distant, distracted, his phone always buzzing. But I chalked it up to work stress and convinced myself that what we needed was time away. So I planned something special, a trip to Italy, just the two of us. I didn't tell him. I wanted it to be a surprise. Our anniversary was coming up, and I thought it would be the perfect moment to remind us both why we started. I had spent nearly 3 months planning every detail. First-class flights, a stone villa in Tuscany with rose gardens and a view of the hills, cooking classes, vineyard tours, and a few museum passes tucked into the folder I now clutched in my lap. The airport was busy that afternoon, the kind of Southern California chaos that smells like sunscreen and coffee. I stood near curbside pickup watching families reunite and solo travelers pull their wheeled suitcases over cracks in the pavement. My heart was steady but warm. I felt like I was doing something good, like I was still capable of making magic out of ordinary days. I had printed the itinerary on soft parchment paper, bound it with a navy ribbon. It was silly maybe, but I loved the ritual of presenting things well. I imagined handing it to him, imagined his eyes lighting up when he realized what I had done. Maybe he'd kiss my forehead, say something teasing about how I'd outdone myself. The car service I arranged was due any minute. My phone buzzed with a message from the driver confirming he was just around the corner. I reached into my bag to double-check our passports and reservation codes, even though I had done it twice already. Everything was perfect. I stood there in a navy blouse and white slacks, hair tucked neatly behind one ear, smiling to myself. Then I heard his voice. Not just his voice. His voice and someone else's laughter, light and unfamiliar, coming up the walkway from arrivals. I recognized the sound of his laugh before I saw him. Ethan had always had this easy, confident laugh like nothing could touch him. It used to make me feel safe. He walked toward me, tall and polished in his gray sport coat, dragging a sleek carry-on behind him. But it wasn't just him. A young woman in a cropped blazer and stiletto heels strolled beside him, one hand hooked lightly around his elbow. She was maybe 25, blonde and airbrushed with legs that looked airlifted from a perfume ad. For a second, I thought maybe she was meeting someone else, an intern catching a different flight, a client, anyone but what she really was. Then Ethan smiled at me, but not the way a husband smiles at his wife, who just planned a $10,000 anniversary trip. He looked at me the way you look at someone delivering your dry cleaning. Quick, dismissive, almost bored. He didn't take the folder from my hand. He didn't reach for my bag. He stopped 3 feet in front of me, and the girl beside him clung a little closer. Actually, I'm taking April instead. His voice was cool and casual, like he was changing dinner reservations, not detonating a marriage. She's more fun. You just want to drag me through museums. She's into real adventure. I felt the wind leave my lungs. Just like that. No warning, no apology. I stared at him, the man I had shared a bed with for a decade, and saw a stranger inside his skin. He had said things that hurt before. Offhand remarks, thoughtless critiques. But this was different. This was something sharpened, planned. April giggled. She actually giggled as if we were in some bad teen comedy, and I was the uptight wife who just didn't get it. She rested her hand on his arm like a prize being escorted through the terminal. I noticed her nails were perfectly French-tipped. I noticed her perfume hit me before her words did. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. I just kept holding the folder fingers stiff on the ribbon I had so carefully tied. Ethan glanced at his watch, told me the driver would be here any second, suggested I go home, maybe order sushi, catch up on one of those shows I liked where nothing exciting happened. His voice was sugar-coated poison, the kind that pretends to care but cuts while it smiles. In the early years, he made me feel like the center of the world. Weekend trips to Napa, surprise lunches, the time he drove across the city just to bring me my favorite scones when I was sick. That man was gone. Maybe he'd been fading for a while, but standing there on the curb, I realized just how far he'd gone without me noticing. People moved past us with their luggage and latte cups. No one noticed my entire life cracking open in public. No one noticed me shrink 2 inches into myself as April whispered something into his ear and laughed again. I handed him the folder, just held it out, no ceremony, no explanation. He took it with one hand, not even meeting my eyes. Then they got into the Blacktown car. I had booked the car that was supposed to take us to the airport as husband and wife. I watched the door close behind them. I watched the taillights fade into the flow of traffic, and then I stood there exactly where he left me. One woman, one carry-on, 10 years of marriage unraveling at curbside pickup. The drive home felt slow and soundless, like I was moving through water. My hand stayed on the wheel steady even when the ache behind my ribs started to spread. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just replayed Ethan's words in my head over and over like some looped recording I hadn't asked for. The house looked the same as it always did. Lavender blooming along the walkway, porch light still on from the night before. Welcome mat straightened just the way I liked it. But everything felt wrong, like I was walking into someone else's life. I dropped my keys on the console table, kicked off my shoes, and sat down at the kitchen island. The folder with our itinerary sat on the counter, a quiet reminder of how much I had hoped. I stared at it for a long time before reaching for my phone. Patricia picked up on the second ring. She'd helped me arrange every detail of the trip. She knew the villa's floor plan by heart and had sent me a list of gelato spots near the hotel that tourists usually missed. I told her I needed to make changes. My voice didn't shake. I asked her to transfer everything to my name. The flights, the reservations, the wine tour in Montepulciano, the private chef I had booked for Tuesday night, every name, every detail, every confirmation number, all of it. She paused concerned, then gently asked if everything was all right. I told her it was, and for the first time in hours, I meant it. Something had shifted. Since everything had been booked under my credit card, the process was easy. She reassured me it would all be reissued in under an hour. I could hear her typing as she updated the villa booking and moved the car service under my profile. When she asked if I wanted to cancel Ethan's ticket, I didn't hesitate. Yes, and add a new guest under mine. I gave her Maya's name, my best friend from college. The one who always told me to stop overcompensating for Ethan's silences. The one who'd been saying I needed a break for years. I hung up the phone and felt my breath settle. There was a strange kind of quiet power in it. Not anger, not revenge, just motion, just reclaiming something that had been mine all along. I sat there a little longer watching the soft light drift through the window. Then I stood up, poured myself a glass of water, and started packing. Not for him, not for us, just for me. I stared at my phone for a long time before calling her. I think I just needed to hear a voice that didn't make me question my worth. Maya answered on the second ring the same way she had since college when I'd call her late at night needing advice, or just to vent about group projects and heartbreak. She sounded surprised but not concerned. Ivy, aren't you supposed to be boarding some romantic plane right now? I gave her the short version, the airport, the girl, the switch. There was a beat of silence, then a sharp inhale followed by a string of words that would have made my mom blush. Maya never did subtle. You want company? She asked, already knowing the answer. I told her the flight was in 5 hours, first-class Tuscany. Without skipping a beat, she said she'd be at the airport in 3, passport in hand and ready to drink her weight in Italian wine. We met in our freshman dorm, bonded over broken vending machines and terrible dates. She was the kind of friend who remembered the name of every person who ever hurt you and held a grudge like it was an art form. She'd always said Ethan was too polished, too rehearsed. I used to defend him. Now I just let her be right. As we talked, I felt something loosen in my chest, that familiar knot that had been tightening for months. Maya didn't offer empty sympathy. She cracked a joke about how we were finally going to have that Europe trip we dreamed about in college. Then she promised to bring her sassiest sunglasses and leave all judgment at home. I hung up smiling, really smiling for the first time that day. There was something about Maya's voice that made everything feel possible again. Not perfect, not fixed, but better. Like maybe this wasn't the end of something, but the start of something I didn't know I needed. By the time we boarded the terminal, lights had begun to dim and the air outside was cooling. I stepped into the first-class cabin and felt something shift in my shoulders. Like a weight I hadn't even named had finally slid off without asking permission. Maya dropped into her seat beside me and kicked off her sneakers with a grin. The flight attendant offered champagne and warm towels, and it all felt like the beginning of something I couldn't define yet, but wanted to hold on to. I clinked glasses with her and watched the city disappear beneath us, its lights shrinking into a glittering net of goodbye. We didn't talk much at first, just quiet sips, small smiles, the kind of silence that speaks without needing noise. I flipped through the menu, realized I didn't have to choose the safer dish, and ordered what sounded bold and unfamiliar. As the hours passed, I let myself relax into the hum of the plane, the soft lighting, the slow luxury of being cared for. Maya started planning out which dresses she'd wear to which dinner. I laughed, really laughed, and it caught me off guard how good it felt. When we landed in Florence, the sky was turning a gentle gold. Morning light spilled across the runway like something out of a painting. The air smelled different, earthier, a little sweet, like pastries and dust and 1,000 old stories. We met our driver at arrivals, a man named Leo, who greeted us like we were old friends. He whisked our bags into the car and chatted about the weather and art festivals as we drove toward the city. Maya pressed her face to the window, pointing at buildings with stone facades and flower boxes, snapping photos like a tourist who didn't care about being subtle. And I just sat there letting it sink in. I wasn't supposed to be here like this, but somehow, this version of the trip felt more real than anything I'd imagined before. I didn't feel abandoned anymore. I felt arrived. By the time we reached the villa, my phone had buzzed more than a dozen times. I had silenced it hours ago, not out of spite, but because I didn't want Ethan's voice invading the quiet I was starting to find. Still, the notification count kept climbing, and curiosity finally caught up with me. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the voicemail list. Maya flopped beside me, already grinning like she knew this was about to get interesting. I hit play on the first one, not sure what I was expecting, but knowing exactly what I needed to hear. His voice came through clipped and annoyed. The hotel had no record of his reservation. Something was clearly wrong. I could picture him standing at the check-in desk, all sharp confidence fading fast under the weight of his own assumptions. The second message was angrier. The car service hadn't shown up. He wanted answers. Maya snorted and shook her head. "Oh, the man is unraveling," she whispered, and I smiled without meaning to. Message 3 came with a touch of panic. Everything was under my name. He couldn't reach anyone. He demanded I fix it. Maya leaned back and said he was starting to sound like a man who realized he needed the person he threw away. By the fifth message, Ethan's tone had changed completely. He wasn't just frustrated now, he was rattled. He said Veronica was upset, that they had no hotel, no car, no itinerary, that I was being unreasonable. Maya raised her brows. He still thinks this is about inconvenience. I nodded. It wasn't about inconvenience, it was about consequences. The final message landed with a different weight. His voice was tight, tired, maybe even scared. He said he looked like a fool, that Veronica was crying, that he didn't know what to do. I looked out at the terrace. The light was softening and the river shimmered beyond the trees. I didn't feel cruel. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt clear. Maya nudged my arm and whispered, "So, what now?" I turned my phone to silent again and set it face down on the nightstand. Now we open that bottle of wine and see what happens when a man finally has to sit in his own mess. The message came in just after breakfast, a number I didn't recognize. The tone was formal at first, like someone emailing a boss they just upset. "Mrs. Carson, this is April. I need to talk to you." I stared at it for a long time, unsure if I wanted to open that door. Maya raised an eyebrow from across the table, coffee in hand, waiting for me to decide. Then another one came. "I got your number from Ethan's phone. He won't tell me anything. We're stuck and I don't know what to do." There was no pretense left in her words, just worry and something close to shame. She said they'd been sleeping at the airport for 2 nights, that all the hotels were booked because of some festival, that she didn't even know it was an anniversary trip until they were already in the air. That stopped me cold. I thought she knew. I thought she came along fully aware of what she was stepping into, but Ethan hadn't told her. He hadn't even given her the decency of truth. Just dragged her into this lie like it was a business lunch. My anger shifted. Not because I forgave her, but because I saw her clearly now. She wasn't just the villain in my story. She was a young woman who thought she was being chosen only to realize she was being used. I remembered being 25, believing people when they said I was special, trusting their confidence more than my own instincts. It didn't excuse what she did, but it made sense in a way that stung deeper than rage. Maya leaned over and read the message, then looked at me like she knew what I was thinking. "Before I said it, she's not the one who owed you the most. He is." Another message came through. Please don't punish me for what I didn't know. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just believed what he told me. I closed my eyes and let the words settle. I typed slowly. You didn't know it was our 10th anniversary. That's on him. But you're also a grown woman. You chose to be with someone married. I hope this teaches you to ask harder questions. Then I paused, took a breath, and added the flight confirmation code for her return trip. Leaves at 6 tonight. Don't miss it. I set the phone down and felt something shift in my chest again. Not closure, not forgiveness, just space. And in that space, peace. I sat on the balcony, the afternoon sun warming the tiles beneath my feet, and stared at the message from April. She sounded exhausted, desperate, and strangely sincere. There was a part of me that wanted to ignore it, to let her feel the sharp end of choices she made without thinking twice. But another part, the quieter part that had carried so many unspoken hurts over the years, knew that wasn't who I wanted to be anymore. I read her words again. She didn't know it was an anniversary trip. Ethan never told her. She thought it was a regular vacation. And suddenly, I saw it all more clearly than I expected. She had been a willing participant, yes, but she hadn't written the script. She had simply stepped into a role someone else designed, and now she was stranded in a foreign country with no way out and no idea what had really been taken from me. I typed slowly. You have a seat on tonight's return flight. Check in by 5, and then I ended it there. No scolding, no lecture, just a lifeline because punishing her wasn't going to undo what Ethan had done. I had nothing left to prove to him or anyone. Maya looked up from her book, watching me with that calm knowing she always carried. She didn't ask what I wrote. She just nodded once and said she was proud of me, and I believed her. As for Ethan, I didn't send him a thing. I didn't respond to the voicemails. I didn't forward him the flight code. I let silence speak the truth he never made room for. I gave the girl a way home, but I left the man exactly where he left me, alone wondering how he got there. The morning light poured into the villa like warm honey, soft and golden, touching everything with a kind of quiet invitation. I wandered through the kitchen barefoot, the tile cool beneath my feet, and poured a cup of strong Italian coffee. Maya was already out on the balcony, curled into the lounge chair with a book and a slice of fresh cantaloupe. We didn't rush. There was no schedule to keep, no one to please. The villa was more beautiful than I remembered from the photos. High ceilings, old wooden beams, the kind of stillness that invites you to breathe slower. Later, the concierge stopped by with a polite smile and a clipboard in hand. She mentioned that a man had called several times asking about the reservation. I didn't have to ask who. She said he was told firmly that guest privacy was our policy. I thanked her with a calm I wouldn't have had 2 days ago. After she left, Maya looked up from her book and asked if I remembered the time Ethan made me rebook a dinner reservation 3 times in one night, because he changed his mind about the view. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I could finally hear the absurdity in it. That version of me running in circles to make sure he never felt discomfort felt like a stranger now. We spent the rest of the day by the garden, a quiet picnic, a shared bottle of wine. I read for hours without checking my phone once. Every now and then Maya would look over and grin like she was proud of me, just for sitting still. I let my mind drift. I thought about how much of my energy had been poured into holding things together, all the ways I had twisted myself small so he could take up more space. And now, in this wide, sunlit quiet, I realized I didn't owe him an apology for letting go. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt free. That day was mine, and I didn't answer to anyone who had forgotten how to speak to me with care. That night, as the lights of Florence twinkled below the terrace, Maya poured us each a glass of wine and leaned back with that steady calm she always carried. She looked at me for a long moment before asking the question I knew was coming. Was I going to divorce him? The question didn't hit me like a knife. It settled instead like something I had already turned over 100 times in my mind, but never said out loud. I looked out at the hills, the shapes soft and quiet in the dusk, and I told her the truth. I didn't know yet, but I did know I couldn't go back to being the woman I was before the airport. I couldn't shrink again just to make someone else comfortable. Maya nodded like she understood without needing more. There was no speech, no advice, no push toward any outcome. Just space, just silence where I could breathe. I thought about all the things I had done in the name of keeping love alive. The compromises that became habits, the way I had measured my worth by how little I asked for in return. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just still. And in that stillness, I knew something had shifted for good. The future wasn't written yet. Maybe I'd leave. Maybe I'd rebuild something else. But either way, I had stepped into a version of myself I didn't want to lose again. Maya reached over and touched my hand. It wasn't dramatic. It was just connection. And in that moment, under a quiet Italian sky, I felt more whole than I had in years. My phone buzzed one last time just as the sky outside our villa began to shift into soft gold. The notification showed his name again, the same name that once made my heart race and now barely stirred a ripple. I stared at the screen for a moment before pressing play, not out of curiosity, but out of something closer to closure. His voice cracked right from the start. There was no polished charm, no confidence, just a threadbare version of the man I used to know. He said things like he didn't understand how we got here, that maybe he'd made a mistake, that we owed it to our years together to try to talk. He didn't mention April. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just talked about himself, about being lost, about not knowing what to do without me. I listened in silence, not because I cared about his answers, but because I had finally stopped trying to rewrite his story to include my voice. When the message ended, I called him. One last time. My voice was steady quiet. I told him the tickets were mine. The trip was mine. That I had given April a way home, but I hadn't done the same for him. He started to speak, but I stopped him. I said I hoped he'd take this time to think about how easily he let go of someone who once planned her whole world around him. And then I hung up. No shouting, no tears, just the final word I had never allowed myself to take. I blocked his number and set the phone face down on the side table. Outside, the sun had dropped low enough to paint everything in amber. The vines along the terrace wall caught the light like threads of fire. I stepped out barefoot and let the cool air touch my skin. Maya was already out there with her book, but she didn't say anything when I joined her. She just poured me a glass of wine and handed it over. I stood quietly and looked out at the view. I thought about how far I had come in just a few days. Not across continents, but across myself. There was nothing left to prove. The man I loved was gone long before that airport scene. I had just needed to see it clearly, and now that I had the ache in my chest wasn't pain. It was space. Space for something new. The night was settling gently over Florence. I didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of my own future. I welcomed it. If you had asked me a week ago what strength looked like, I might have said compromise. I might have told you it meant standing by someone even when they stopped standing by you. But now, sitting in this quiet Italian morning with the sun on my face, I know better. Strength is choosing yourself when everything in you has been trained not to. It's recognizing the moment when holding on becomes more painful than letting go. It's walking away not out of anger, but because peace finally matters more than being right. I don't think healing is always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, like sipping coffee alone and realizing you're not lonely. Sometimes it's not about revenge or closure or getting the last word. It's just the quiet knowledge that you're no longer trying to earn love that should have been given freely. So if you're watching this and some part of you feels lost or small or unseen, I hope you remember that you're allowed to choose differently. You're allowed to take your name back, your space back, your joy back. And if you're brave enough to do that, what would your next step look like?